What up, guys? My name is Patricia, also known as Godzdesign, here on YouTube, and welcome to my channel. A while ago, I came to you guys talking to you guys about the nature of the videos on my channel sort of changing a little bit to include more of my spiritual side, which is a big part of my life, right? I was struggling with how to approach actually studying the word together with you guys, and I was just struggling with the approach and the idea and how to go about it, so much so that it was sort of stopping me from doing it at all. So this past weekend, when I was actually at church listening to a sermon, the idea just sort of came to me. So I'm going to call this particular series, this Bible study series, Art Class. And the reason why I'm calling it Art Class, because when I think of art, I think of paintings. And when I think of paintings, I think of sort of an emotion or an idea that you were trying to visualize. That's what we're going to do here in the art class. We're going to paint the picture. And the idea of that comes from the fact that I think a lot of times when we talk about like the Bible and things of the Bible, we think of it being something so distant, so far away, so far-fetched, right? That we can't possibly sort of relate to it right now, and we really can. These same concepts and these same principles are timeless. Even the Bible says that there's nothing new under the sun. And if we just take the Bible and sort of break it apart into principles, we can learn a lot from some of these storylines. And so today, in order to honor the sermon that gave me the idea of this particular topic, I want to talk about the same text. And I won't go in the same direction as that particular speaker did, but I definitely want to take the text because there was a lot of things that I sort of pulled from it that I think will be helpful to us to talk about in this first video. So the text is Genesis. We're in Genesis 22. We're going to take it from verse 1 all the way to verse 12. I think it'd be great if you guys decided to follow along, and I'm going to be reading from the New Living Translation, which is actually one of my favorite translations of the Bible. It starts off saying, sometime later, God tested Abraham's faith. Abraham, God called. Yes, he replied, here I am. Take your son, your only son, yes, Isaac, whom you love so much, and go to the land of Moriah. Go and sacrifice him as a burnt offering on one of the mountains which I will show you. The next morning, Abraham got up early. He saddled his donkey and took two of his servants with him, along with his son Isaac. Then he chopped wood for a fire for a burnt offering and set out for the place God had told him about. On the third day of their journey, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. Stay here with the donkey, Abraham told the servants. The boy and I will travel a little farther. We will worship there. Then we will come right back. So Abraham placed the wood for the burnt offering on Isaac's shoulders while he himself carried the fire and the knife. And the two of them walked on together. Isaac turned to Abraham and said, Father. Yes, my son, Abraham replied. We have the fire and the wood, the boy said, but where is the sheep for the burnt offering? God will provide a sheep for the burnt offering, my son, Abraham answered. And they both walked on together. When they arrived at the place where God had told him to go, Abraham built an altar and arranged the wood on it. Then he tied his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. And Abraham picked up the knife to kill his son as a sacrifice. At that moment, the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven, Abraham, Abraham. Yes, Abraham replied, here I am. Don't lay a hand on the boy, the angel said. Do not hurt him in any way, for now I know that you truly fear God. You have not withheld anything from me, even your son, your only son. So guys, there is a lot in here. A lot in here. But I want to talk to you guys for a few moments about faith. Abraham was included in what I like to call the faith Hall of Fame in Hebrews, where it says by faith so-and-so did this, by faith so-and-so did this, by faith so-and-so did this. Yes, Abraham was included in the faith Hall of Fame in Hebrews. The beginning of the text starts off by saying, and God tested Abraham's faith. So let's go ahead and start off by painting the picture a little bit and making this story come alive and really making this thing personal. And so Abraham, previously Abram, was made a promise God made Abraham a promise. He changed his name from Abram to Abraham. He said that he would make Abraham the father of many nations. He said that he would make Abraham fruitful and that many nations and kings would come from him, that would be in his lineage. God made a covenant not only with him, but with all of Abraham's descendants. So fast forward, Abraham is older, and so is his wife. And she is still unable to bear a child. So can you imagine, and I'm sure you've been in a situation where God has made you a promise, but you still aren't seeing it fulfilled. I know many of us have been in a situation where we prayed about something and even received confirmation on it, but we have yet to see that thing manifest. And this is a situation that Abraham was in. God made him a promise, and his wife is getting old, he's getting old, and it just doesn't look possible. I know I've definitely been in a situation where it didn't look possible. It didn't look like it could happen. It didn't look like it was going to happen. It was looking pretty bleak. And I started to doubt. I started to doubt God. And that was exactly what happened with Abraham. So much so that he kind of went another route, which you guys can sort of read about. Through this mistake and through this doubt, he ended up making a mistake. And it's through this mistake that we have the line of Ishmael, which is the reason why we still have these issues in the Middle East today between the lineage of Isaac and the lineage of Ishmael. But that's a whole nother story. And the lesson in that is that we are not to doubt God, that we should let him do him and not take matters into our own hands, right? So eventually Sarah does bear a son, and they call him Isaac. Isaac is the apple of his father's eye. You can imagine. He just loves this little boy. God even told Abraham that it was through Isaac that his promise will come to pass. And so Isaac was the visualization of this promise that God made to Abraham. So that brings us to this text, chapter 22, where God asked Abraham to kill his son Isaac, the apple of his eye, the visualization of this promise coming to pass, the manifestation of this promise, right? He asked him to kill. And you know what's worse? If you go back to the beginning of the text where God is speaking to him, he's like, yeah, I want you to kill Isaac. Yeah, Isaac, the one that you really love, the one you love so much. I want you to kill him and to offer him as a sacrifice. Sometimes God is going to ask us to do some really tough things. The part that I really want to highlight is verse 3 to verse 5. And I just want to read it one more time for you guys. It says, the next morning, Abraham got up early. He saddled his donkey and took 2 of his servants with him, along with his son Isaac. Then he chopped wood for a fire for a burnt offering and set out for the place God had told him about. On the 3rd day of their journey, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. Here it is. Stay here with the donkey, Abraham told the servants. The boy and I will travel a little farther. We will worship there. Then we will come right back. Basically, Abraham was declaring that he would return to his servants with his son. That is huge. Abraham had the faith that his son would return to him. I know God said for me to kill my son, but he also said that I will be the father of many nations, and that my lineage would be carried through this boy. And I know it looks really weird, and he's asking me to do things that are very, very difficult, but I'm willing to be obedient to what God has told me to do. And I know in the end that the promise will still come to pass, and I know that my son, an hour later, my battery totally died. My battery wouldn't let me be great, but I was determined to finish this video. I'm about to get this out. I'm about to get this out tonight, okay? So to continue, I don't know really where I left off, but we're gonna continue where I think I left off, and that's in Hebrews 11 verse 19. So let's go and read it. Abraham told his servants that he would be back, and not only would he be back, but he would be back with his son. And listen to what Hebrews 11:19 said. This is Abraham, again, this is the New Living Translation. Abraham reasoned that if Isaac died, God was able to bring him back to life again. And in a sense, Abraham did receive his son back from the dead. And I think what's really important here in Hebrews is basically Abraham thought that if his son died, that God could resurrect him. And this is Genesis 22. At no point it is recorded in the Bible at this point that anyone was resurrected from the dead. So this is not something that maybe he's seen God do before, that, every once in a while God would, resurrect someone. This is not something that's happened on a daily for him to just be like, okay, well, obviously God gonna rest. I mean, this took major faith. Basically, what's going on through Abraham's mind at this point is not that God is not able to keep his promise, but that it may not be the way that he envisioned that it would look. And that for whatever reason, God is asking to do the unthinkable, the unimaginable, but for whatever reason, it must have a purpose. And this won't alter the manifestation of the promise, because God promised it. And sorry guys, I promise you, you know what? I bet you this video must be for somebody, because I have had 15,000 interruptions, from phone calls to text messages to my battery dying to this light acting out. You know what? We're gonna get this video out. We are gonna life won't let me be great right now. So instead of Abraham saying, you know what, maybe this thing won't come to pass, maybe the nation of Israel wouldn't come from, my son Isaac, but maybe some other son that'll come later on, or maybe it was Ishmael this whole time. No, he didn't doubt. Abraham reasoned that if Isaac died, God was able to bring him back to life. Obviously, because that's the only thing that makes sense, because you're God and what you say happens. And you said that you may be the father of nations and that it would come from Isaac, from this line. But you're asking me to kill my son, the son whom I love, my only son. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Why is it that we're waiting for us to see before we have faith, when the very definition of faith calls for us not to see? There are 3 things I want to share with you. I'm going to run through them quickly, and then we're just going to sort of bring them all together. So the first thing that we need to do is trust the promise. Abraham trusted the promise. Because before he had little issues with that, and then we had the whole situation with Hagar. He slept with Hagar, right? And they begat Ishmael, right? We talked about the issues that Ishmael and Isaac had, and that they continue to have, those 2 nations continue to have today. And so in this time, he said, I'm going to learn from my mistake, and I'm not going to doubt. I'm going to trust the promise. And it is through this trust that he was able to be obedient, because he could have been like, God, wait, what? Nah, I ain't finna kill my son. Ain't you the one who told me? No, there was none of that. There was none of that back talk. He trusted the promise that, okay, so he's telling me to kill him, but obviously I'm going to bring him to life, because what he said was, I'd be a father of many nations. The second thing I want to point out is that he trusted the process. He didn't understand why it was that God was asking him to do this. And no point is it recorded in the text that he even dared to ask God why. And for whatever reason, I'm kind of talking to myself here, sometimes we feel like we need all the details before we can move forward. But rather, we ought to believe that what God is instructing us to do is part of this overall process. And though we cannot see, again, we're getting back to the sight and the lack there of sight when it comes to faith. Though we cannot see, we ought to know that God has the process all figured out, and at the end, that'll work out for our good. Third point is that we ought to trust the provider. And the provider meaning God. He will provide the answers. He will provide the resources. He will provide the means. He will provide the time, the people, the energy. He is our provider. So we have to trust the person that we're dealing with. Just a second ago, we talked about knowing all the details and how we don't need to know all the details, but there are a few things we ought to be certain about. And we ought to be certain about who we're dealing with, and that is God. And like I said earlier, he's not a man that he should lie. So if he says it, it shall come to pass. We're not talking about some old somebody, we're talking about God. So we ought to be certain that it is God we're dealing with. We ought to be certain that it is His will that we're dealing with, and not be so hung up on gaining clarity about details. This is what I mean about certainty versus clarity. We ought to be certain that it's God. We ought to be certain that it's His will. We ought to be certain that it is His promise. And everything else will sort of come together. The details will come together, and He will make those things known as He sees fit, when He sees fit. Trust His sovereignty. Trust the provider. So the first thing is to trust the promise. The second thing is to trust the process. And the third thing is to trust the provider. There are a lot of things we can learn from this particular text, but I think a lot of us struggle with this thing called faith. And this faith Hall of Famer teaches us a lot in this short passage. And like I said, there are a lot of things I could talk about here, but those few words, and I think verse 5 really stuck out to me when he said, "We will return." It took a lot of faith to make that declaration when God just told you to kill your son. And for some of us, it will take a lot of faith in order for us to be obedient in what God has called us to do, whether that is to move, to leave our town, to leave everything we've known, whether it's to go back to school, whether it is to start a ministry or enter the ministry. And I want us to sort of get out of this concept where it has to be physically tangible to us, because faith is the exact opposite of that. I think in this particular text, we like to sort of focus on just obedience and what obedience can do and what obedience can give you. And that definitely has its place. Even talk about the obedience of, or how obedient Isaac must have been for him to just lay down, and his father raising a knife and him just to lay down there without a struggle. And how, when his dad said, "Hey, God will provide, the offering," where he was just like, "Oh, all right, cool, Dad, if you say so." We like to talk about obedience, and I think that definitely has its place. But there's a lot of faith in this passage. My prayer for you guys is that you guys develop your faith. And the Bible just says you just need a little bit, just the size of a mustard seed, and you'll be able to move mountains. My prayer is that we start to work on that. It's just something simple like, "Lord, just help me to believe in you. Help me to trust you." A lot of us have trust issues with people, and we treat God the same way. Let us not do that, because He's not like people. The Bible says He will never leave you or forsake you. People will do that. The Bible says that He's not a man that He should lie. People will lie. He's God. And if you haven't given Him a try, I really think you should. It is still single-handedly the best decision that I could have ever made. So thank you guys so much for attending this week's art class. I hope you guys learned a little bit, and I helped you guys to see the picture a little bit more differently, or a little bit more clearly. I want to hear from you guys in the comment section. For sure, I want to hear feedback. I want to hear the things that you learned from the text, or maybe something that you didn't know that you learned while watching this video. I'm gonna keep them coming. I'm gonna keep pinching myself and to really get it out there. I don't want anything to stop me from putting this content out. And I'm not interested in popularity. I'm not interested in views at this point, but I'm interested in quality, and I'm interested in reaching the people that it ought to reach. So I want to hear from you in the comment section. I want you guys to share this video. I want you guys to like this video, and I'll see you very, very soon in next week's art class. I'll see you then, guys.